Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I just got done writing this article for flockfantasy.com, and I will tell you, I was interested in this wide receiver before we started, but after doing all the research over the past few hours, I've come away with the conclusion that this player is elite. Yes, he may or may not have only been the wide receiver 48 on a points per game basis this past season, but we are going to ignore that. We are going to look at some statistics that actually matter, and I'm going to give you my case on why we should be going out and buying this player. But before we get into it, of course, if you want access to these articles like a week in advance before we cover them on YouTube, if you want to get additional exclusive articles, my Dynasty rankings, the Dynasty rankings of every one of your favorite Dynasty fantasy football expert, you can find it all on flockfantasy.com. When you sign up for flockfantasy.com with promo code FLOCK, you are going to get 30% off any subscription. And at the same time, when you sign up for that Mother Flocker tier, yours truly will go through and make a podcast breaking down your Dynasty team. But I think that should be about it. You can find that link in the comment section and description. And let's dive into this player I really want to look at. So in 2022, he averages 10.5 points per game, and he is the wide receiver 48 on a points per game basis. But in my mind, it's not his fault whatsoever. And we're not even trying to say, oh, he was playing through an injury. Oh, if he would have been healthier, he would have been better. No, we don't even have to make that excuse for him because the underlying numbers were phenomenal. This was a player that also at the same time was an elite level prospect. You knew he was elite coming into the NFL. He broke out as a freshman. He dominated his junior season in college. He declared early for the NFL draft, and he was a round 1 NFL draft pick as well. Now, it's nice checking all these boxes, but sometimes you'll see a wide receiver from a small school check all these boxes, and we're like, cool story, bro. I'm really happy you're able to go out there and average 100 receiving yards per game against a bunch of future accountants. But no, this wide receiver here played alongside other top NFL talent. Now, I know this is probably going to give away the secret here, but he played alongside both Amon-Ra St. Brown as well as Michael Pittman Jr., and he dominated with these players on the roster. If we go through and look at 2019 USC, you're going to see that this team had a 21-year-old Michael Pittman Jr., a 19-year-old Amon-Ra St. Brown, and an 18-year-old Drake London. Now, if we were going to be looking at the receiving yards on a per game basis, Michael Pittman Jr., 98 receiving yards per game. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 80 receiving yards per game. So we would assume, okay, well, an 18-year-old wide receiver, he can't get on the field, all right? I mean, you have two quality NFL players that are much, much older in the same offense. We'd assume that Drake London, at 18 years old, wasn't able to get on the field. He didn't do much, but no. Drake London averages more than 70 receiving yards a game as a freshman, with Michael Pittman Jr. as a senior on the team, and Amon-Ra St. Brown a year older as well. Now, going to his second season, Drake London continues to improve. Michael Pittman Jr. is drafted in the NFL. Then there's really only left over Amon-Ra St. Brown and Drake London. Now, keep in mind, Amon-Ra St. Brown's still a year older than Drake London. Amon-Ra St. Brown's 20, Drake London is 19, but Drake London's the wide receiver 1 on the team. Drake London averages over 83 receiving yards per game compared to Amon-Ra St. Brown at 79. So at a younger age, Drake London is better than Amon-Ra St. Brown on this same team. I don't need to tell you this, but let's just go ahead and let's pull up how damn good Amon-Ra St. Brown was this past season, how good Amon-Ra St. Brown was in year 1, because this is a player that's currently going at the end of round 1, the beginning of round 2 of 2023 best ball drafts. And this is a player that obviously is consensus viewed as a mid wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. If we're pulling this up right now, Amon-Ra St. Brown's coming off a season where he had 72 receiving yards per game and was a wide receiver 1 from a fantasy points per game perspective. Drake London was better as a younger player in the same offense. Then Amon-Ra St. Brown goes to the NFL. Drake London's the last guy standing there. And Drake London, as a junior at USC, put up one of the best seasons we've seen from a wide receiver prospect in quite some time. Better than anything we have in this year's draft class. I'll tell you that right now. He goes out there and he averages 135 receiving yards per game, which is good for 45% 45% of the per game passing yards for this USC team. Then he's drafted round 1, first wide receiver off the board, ahead of Garrett Wilson, ahead of Chris Olave, ahead of Jameson Williams. Then on top of this, he goes to a wide receiver room that doesn't have much competition. You have Olamide Zaccheaus there, and of course, Kyle Pitts at tight end. So everything was shaping up for Drake London to come in and dominate year 1. If you were looking at my prospect model at the wide receiver position, Drake London scored a 40. If we are going to go through and look at every score since 2014 that was close to this, every single one of these players has been a massive hit. We have T. Higgins, who scored a 39. You had Garrett Wilson, Justin Jefferson. They both scored 40s as well. I mean, we know at this time that Garrett Wilson is coming off a monstrous rookie season on his own front. Then players that scored higher than a 40. These were like the best of the best ever wide receiver prospects. Jamar Chase, Amari Cooper, Sammy Watkins, Calvin Ridley. All these guys, massive hits at the NFL level. Now, we get to his rookie season. Like I said, you would assume that, yeah, Drake London had a horrible year. He was the wide receiver 48 on a points per game basis. But no, that's not the case. What was horrible about year 1 was the offense that he was stuck in. Nothing about Drake London, the player himself. Because if we are going to go through and look at this, the Atlanta Falcons averaged 158 passing yards per game. Now, that's bad, of course. We all know that, but it doesn't seem like it's that bad because the Chicago Bears were down there at 130 passing yards per game. The Bears were down there at 130. I think that most people are going to say, okay, well, yeah, the Atlanta Falcons are only the second worst, but no. The Bears were just the worst passing offense in modern day NFL history last year, so it skews your perception of how bad the Atlanta Falcons were. If we are going to look at 2012 through 2022, the Atlanta Falcons were the third worst passing offense in that 10-year period. Obviously, Chicago was the worst. I don't remember the team that was the second worst, but Atlanta was the third worst. So the Atlanta Falcons this past season had one of the worst passing offenses that we have seen over the past decade. The third worst, to be exact. You had Arthur Smith not wanting to throw the ball, and whenever he was willing to, you had Marcus Mariota not getting the job done. So what we need to do to see how good was Drake London actually this year is we need to look at the percentage of the offense he accounted for, because the offense was horrendous. But what was the percentage of that offense he accounted for? Because if it was relatively high, we can assume that when the offense gets better, Drake London will start scoring fantasy points. So what I did is I headed over to RotoViz and I looked at the target share from a per game basis. This way it's fair. Drake London played all 17 games. I don't want to make him look better than he is. We're looking at a per game basis target share of any wide receiver since the year 2000 that was 21 years old. Here are the players that were able to account for 24% of their team's targets on a per game basis since the year 2000 at 21 years old. Jamar Chase, he's pretty good. Not sure if you've heard of him. Mike Evans, he's pretty good. Not sure if you've heard of him. Justin Jefferson, he's pretty good. Not sure if you've heard of him. Drake London. Not only was Drake London on this historic list, but at the same time, Drake London was the best wide receiver during this time frame. And it wasn't even close either. Drake London was at 29% of the Atlanta Falcons target share. At 21. That's generational. It's something we've never seen, at least since the year 2000. I'd imagine we probably had never seen it before then either. So if we're going through this, one of the best wide receiver prospects we've seen in a very long time goes to a team that is historically one of the worst passing offenses over the past decade, but he dominates in that offense. Drake London's elite. There's nothing else to say. I would rather have him over any wide receiver in this draft class. I would rather have Drake London over any running back or wide receiver in this draft class, not named Bijan Robinson. I actually had to go through and move him up in my rankings on flockfantasy.com right after we wrote this article. I already had him relatively high, but I wanted to make sure that we had him in a respectable range. So we went through and we moved him up. Our wide receiver 12 in Dynasty, we have him ranked as our 30th player overall in our rankings. His average on flogfantasy.com is 31. Drake London's great. I don't know how the Atlanta Falcons are going to improve. The second we get confirmation that the Atlanta Falcons are bringing in a much better quarterback and we know what's going on here, I'll be willing to move him even higher. This may be a very, very bad offense, but the second that it's respectable, Drake London will be one of the best wide receivers in football. Now, thank you again. I really appreciate you. Really hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you go check out flogfantasy.com. Link in the comment section, link in the description. Promo code FLOG, 30% off any subscription, as well as a podcast breaking down your Dynasty team by yours truly and all this cool stuff, of course. Now, thank you. Appreciate you. Hope you have a great day and hope we get to see you with the video tomorrow.